Welcome back to another episode of the Two Track Mind Podcast.
Propaganda. Propaganda Mondays. Bring the energy to you. Must be watching this on your drive to work, but like, comment, subscribe, and let's have a great week, everyone.
For everyone who's just listening in, he's flashing up the driver's paddock logo.
Yo, I got the t-shirt on too.
It's not enough to have it on his chest, but he needs to start throwing a placard around here too.
Check out this guy's Spotify. Check out that Track Days hat. I love it.
All right, welcome back. It's Monday. Let's talk about what's going on in the automotive space. So, drivers meeting today. We're going to talk about the Mustang GTD. Okay, they recently did a sub 7 minute, which is kind of like the hypercar benchmark these days.
Yeah, they've already done a sub 7, and they improved on their time. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, this first time was also sub 7.
First time was sub 7, and it was they said it was a damp track. They also have a really like mini documentary on the car, so that's on YouTube.
That was really cool
from Ford. Go check that out. Super cool footage and filming is very cinematic.
Yep.
But a lot of people were like, that's not fast enough. It's not fast enough, and so they went back and went a little bit faster. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're probably getting a lot of... I mean, we'll talk about this, but we're probably getting a lot of pressure from some other American manufacturers as well, right?
Of course.
So what's coming through the pipeline? All right, Shop Talk. Shop Talk, I want to kind of... There's a few topics around braking again that I want to talk about because a whole bunch of stuff came to mind after last week when we talked about how to choose a brake pad and brake modulation. So let's talk about carbon ceramic brakes in Shop Talk today, okay? Like, what are they? Why are high-end cars shipping with them, and why are people choosing to swap them out in many cases, right? HPDA corner, again, with the braking topic, we kind of introduced some stuff last week, and I think there is one point that kind of came up in conversation over the past couple of days that I think is worth discussing, which is how to deal with sudden brake loss or sudden brake fade when you're on track. So if you've never experienced it before, definitely tune into this part of the podcast because I think, obviously we don't want that experience to happen to people, but it's bound to, especially if you're driving a variety of cars or somebody else's vehicle or a team car, something like that. It happens more often than you think. Okay, and we do have Q&A today, so we'll get to that toward the end. So let's jump into it. Mustang GTD. Okay, so we kind of already discussed they just did a whole bunch of press stuff at the Nürburgring. It's doing sub 7. Even after the second one, I think they were saying, oh, there's still more on the table, which is, of course, like these runs are very limited. If you had like the track to yourself for a whole day on ideal conditions, it's probably going to go pretty quickly around the track. And the main piece of news that just came out recently, and this is still a bit of a rumor, but I think it's somewhat credible. So on Matt Farah's podcast, he mentioned that somebody that he knows who is in line for the car, the final pricing is starting to be revealed, and the first digit starts with a 6
USD.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Right?
That's so expensive. 600K USD.
600K.
That's like 500 million Canadian at this point with the exchange rate.
Yeah, with our monopoly money. Yeah, I mean, initially, I think people were thinking that this was going to be a car in the 300,000s, right? Which kind of puts it in line with like, I don't know, a 3RS price range. Some Ferraris maybe.
No, 3RS is like 400, almost 500.
Well, I mean, like MSRP.
Even MSRP, man.
Even MSRP?
Yeah, man, these guys are specing them like,
I guess it depends on how you spec it, right? But at 6, this becomes like probably one of the most, if not the most expensive road legal GT cars that you can try to get in line for.
Oh,
like,
you know what? I'm wrong. It is 600 USD. Yeah. 3RS is like high 4s, 500 Canadian. So you're totally right. It's
like a 300,
you're totally right.
US, right?
Yeah.
Like, so the point of comparison was a 3RS Visoc edition is like 440, 450 USD, I think.
Yeah.
Spec'd out from the factory. So
yeah.
Is it worth an additional 150K over the highest end Porsche GT car that you can get, or 3RS? I mean, I don't know. I guess GT2 RS you could probably go even crazier on price, but I don't know. What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, like even the name, like Mustang GTD. GTD, for those who don't know, I believe it stands for Grand Touring Daytona, or I forget what the GT is, but the D is Daytona, which is the new nomenclature for like basically racing in GT3 class, right? And so there's GTD Pros basically, so it used to be GT3 Pros in IMSA, and so that name is already like, this is a serious track car. We're talking like, okay,
Yeah.
it has like a GT3 name, right?
Yeah.
And the performance better match. Like this thing has like 325 front tires, 345 rear tires, over 800 horsepower, has some active aero. I think people expected a lot more from this car than just under 7. The 3RS initially was like, I think 8 seconds faster.
Yeah.
Now they improved on their time, and a lot of people are, commenting on cornering speeds, and even top speeds. I guess the aero drag and the grip and everything, just even with Multimatic suspension and all these things on paper that look amazing, I think Porsche just has had more time to develop their product to a point where it's like up there. Yeah, I mean, we can talk price all day. Like people buy McLarens, people buy Lamborghinis, people buy all these very, very expensive cars, but it seems as though the 3RS is the, I mean, it's really close to even the Cup car variant of itself, with a lot of testing from other people. But I think it's just the performance car right now.
Yeah, and when you think about the $600K price tag, like who's going to be buying this thing? It really is it's going to be like someone's like 10th car kind of thing, right? Like, and it's probably not going to be driven that much because when at $600K, like, and again, like performance for value and like parts being readily available, I just don't see this being something that we're going to see on track very often. Like at most part, we see tons of Porsches. Right, tons of Porsches, McLarens from time to time, but I don't know. The type of person who's going to buy this is going to be a collector.
Yeah.
So
what I'm more excited about is when manufacturers come out with these crazy halo cars.
Yeah.
Some of that technology starts to trickle into the other Mustangs. I think that's what I'm more excited about. I mean, there's Multimatic suspension, there's some active aero, transmissions in the back, like transaxle DCT in the back to achieve more 50/50 weight distribution. So it's going to handle completely different than other Mustangs of old. Even though, like, for example, like the, GT350R, those are like great, right? The Mustangs there's some really good track variants. But I think if you take some of that trickle down technology into those cars, wow, it's gonna be different.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be cool. But then again, like as you said, like this is a car that's mainly being built by Multimatic, which by the way is not that far from where we are now, in Markham. And the other stuff that's like obviously like in back of my mind as to why this price hike, Multimatic is in Canada. If they're manufacturing here and they're gonna sell most of them in the US, I don't know. That's gonna be a tariff that's slapped on there of like what is it now, like 25%. And then Ford has publicly stated that this year is gonna be really tough for them, as with other auto manufacturers. And if they're tooling up to make 1,000 units of this at $600K, $600 million in revenue, if they sell all of them, that's gonna have an impact, right? And so like if they are confident that they can sell all allocations, I guess why not? But then you're basically heading in this direction of just because we can, we're gonna do it, as opposed to like just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? They're basically saying, yeah, we can find the customers who are willing to buy this at this price, and why not? Just from a financial perspective, why not? Right. Short term could be pretty good, but yeah, I'm just worried more long term. What does this mean for their next car? Right. Like people get their hands on this and maybe there's some buyer's remorse in terms of the performance, because as I said, like a lot of people were speculating that they pushed for this second time around at Nürburgring. Yes, the first time was damp, but well, some people are saying that they're kind of worried about what GM has in the pipeline,
Mm-hmm.
right, with the Corvette,
Mm-hmm.
that they could do an even better time at what I would expect to be a significantly lower price point,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not performance for dollar, right? I think it could be a very special car. I mean, 1,000 units, is that super limited? Not really. I mean, it's very limited, but not like super limited.
But that's
right?
why I think like this feels like a bit of a cash grab, just a little. Yeah.
600K USD. That's crazy. That's crazy. You can get a GT3 RS MR. That'd be cool. But I mean, if you want like a straight track toy monster, but
Yeah.
I mean, 800 horsepower on the street's kind of fun too. Going to cars and coffee.
I hope that the steering rack is not what we experienced in the GT350R.
Yeah.
'Cause I found like that was the first thing that when I drove that car, I was like, oh my gosh, it's the rack is so slow. You gotta like really move your arms to get it going.
Yeah, big wheel too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And light steering.
Yeah.
That was weird.
Yeah.
That was weird. Anyway. All right, moving on to shop talk. Let's talk about carbon ceramic brakes. So what kind of triggered this is Savage Geese, the car reviewers, Mark and Jack, yeah. Great car reviewers. Actually, I've been following Mark's stuff since like 2013. With his back in the day he had an FRS, and I kind of like copied a lot of the modifications I did with the supercharger and with the AP racing brakes, the Olin suspension. He just did so much R&D on the platform at the time, so I was like, great, I'll just benefit from that.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a pretty lengthy video about brake systems, and that created a lot of conversation online. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of dig a little bit deeper on and talk about for our listeners, for our viewers, is the merits of carbon ceramic brakes. Why do some high-end cars, even not even like super high-end cars, right? Like I think like the M2 Comp, you can option it with carbon ceramics.
M2
right?
CS.
CS, okay. Corvettes, the very common option if you get like, the Z06 package and stuff like that. I think a lot of Z06 came with carbon ceramics. Maybe that's also an additional option or something like that you can toggle on and off. But why have manufacturers started putting them on cars, and then why is it that we see among our friendship circle that a lot of people actually decide to take them off and sell them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, did you ever had a car with carbon ceramics personally?
No, I'd never owned a car with carbon ceramics, but I've driven a lot of cars with carbon ceramics. Like even like the Giulia Quadrifoglio that can come with carbon ceramics. I've driven an M2 CS that had carbon ceramics. Honestly, let's talk about what's good about carbon ceramics first. Sure. Like why are they even on there, right? Like you don't need to replace rotors as often. Okay. Heat management is really, really good. Mm-hmm. Right. And just temperature range.
Asterisk on heat management.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? What do you want to expand on that?
So from what I have researched, the operating window is tighter. If you have runaway heat, they fade and disintegrate a lot faster.
So if you keep them within this range, they're amazing, right? But they're really expensive, right? When it comes to replacing rotors, like on the Giulia, a set of front rotors is like 20,000 with pads. It's crazy amount, right? That's like a fifth of the cost of the entire car. Versus your typical steel rotor would be maybe 800 a piece, right? And then pads would be like, maybe another 500 to 700 with a caliper that big. So, I mean, a lot of people swap out the carbon ceramics. Just you can sell them for, like I said, 1/5 of the price of the car, or maybe like maybe
a little bit of discount.
1/8, a little bit of discount, and then put on steel rotors and pads and in the same caliper, and you're good to go, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I've heard is carbon ceramics don't do well with prolonged sessions on track. When you get them to a certain temperature over a longer session, like, I don't know, like 20 20 minutes plus, over like half an hour maybe, and you're on like sticky tires, it's just going to start fading, start wearing down. And then, yeah, like you said, you're going to be on the hook to replace those at like well over $10,000 for a set of fronts. It just doesn't really make sense, right? And the flip side of that is like, if it's mostly like a weekend car or street car, it probably will last the life of the car. But then my question becomes, is it still worth it? Even cars like on steel rotors, like how often are you going to be replacing, front brakes through the life of a car? Maybe 3 times max, I would say, if it's just like a weekend car. Like you don't go through rotors that quickly, maybe pads or something like that, right? And as someone who's kind of experienced, especially with like, take for example the X5. Before I took delivery of it, it had issues with uneven deposits. Now, I don't know if that's a thing with just like BMWs, or because it's a hybrid system, has regenerative, you don't brake very much, or you're always like lightly dragging on the brakes to get to a stop as opposed to doing a lot of heavy braking. That could be part of it. But, once those uneven deposits occur, your options are either you go try and bed it in on like a side street, right? Just doing like 100 down to 20 3 times over or something like that, put some heat into it, see if you can scrub it, or you just have to do an entire brake job. And in the X5, like for example, an OEM full brake job is like $5,000. It's not cheap, right? So I'm just thinking, okay, well, are the carbon ceramics also going to be exposed to that kind of situation? Because that would suck, right? Like you have something that's built as like, oh, it could last an entire car's lifetime, but then you go on vacation for like a month and you come back and the brakes are shuddering every time you drive or something like that. That would suck, right? So like in my mind, it doesn't feel like the performance benefits and the financial benefits, it doesn't really seem to be there for me.
And if you get a chip in the surface,
that's it, right?
Oh man, it's over. Yeah. And I mean, I have a friend who doesn't track, who put on carbon ceramics on his car.
Yeah.
The reason for it is brake dust. Does no brake dust.
A lot less. That's right.
I mean, he's a baller.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're watching
a show car guy,
if you're washing your car, on a weekly basis, right? Yeah. If you're trying to keep it pretty, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. So full carbon ceramic setup, no more brake dust. He's so happy. So I mean, to each their own. But I mean, in our sphere, not show and shine, and constantly cleaning wheels. Our wheels are like destroyed. But performance. A steel rotor with a good pad, like I think performance wise is like right up there, right? If not better in terms of heat management or endurance racing or things like that. I think it's the right choice.
Yeah. For like a private car owner. I'm sure like if you're on a serious team, then whatever. That's probably not a significant part of your cost anyway, and they're probably figure that out. But yeah, it's just something that I want to kind of discuss, because with people with the means of acquiring like a mid upper tier or higher tier sports car as like their first track car, it's probably not something that you're really thinking about before you take it out onto track. Yeah. What kind of braking system are you running? Yeah. Cool. All right. Now let's move on to HPD corner. So as we discussed earlier about braking, I want to kind of discuss how we're going to deal with sudden brake loss or brake fade when you're on track. I guess first of all, like, has this happened to you? Like, what's your most like vivid memory of losing brakes on track that you can recall?
Honestly, I'm pretty safe when it comes to brakes. Like, especially in my own car, like I do a little bit of left foot braking. I I don't run anti-knockback pads. Like for example, in the M2, and I'll just give the brake pad a little tap, right, just to make sure that I have the brakes. Like for example, like going into like any big braking zone, especially at GP. Yeah, I'll check.
Talk about that a little bit more. Like why tap the brakes?
So without anti-knockback pads, the pads are kind of moving around a little bit between the rotor and the piston.
Yeah.
And so when you just give the brakes a little bit of a tap, you're essentially pushing the piston right up against the rotor, so that when you do get to the brakes, it's there right away. and you just give it a little bit of a tap just to make sure that your brakes are fine, because we're finding like 240 plus at Mosport, right, back corner. So I just make sure that okay, we're okay coming into this, and then I have the brakes. That's why I do that. In manual cars, I don't really do that sometimes. But in terms of brake loss, I haven't had a, knock on wood, I haven't had a situation where I've completely lost the brakes. However, I've experienced, friends that have multiple occasions and seen it happen on track multiple occasions. And yeah, it's a very scary thing. If your pedal is still firm and you're not able to stop the car, it's your pads, right? Is your pads overheating or whatever? But if your pedal goes to the floor, then it's a pressure issue. It's a fluid issue, right? Or you've bowled over your fluid, or there's a break in the line or something. But yeah, like I've been in a situation where I've been on the street, I've bed the brakes, new calipers, right? And the pedal is a bit soft. Like, you try to prime it, you go in and out of the pedal. Then on the street, like the pedal went all the way to the floor. And in that situation, what you do is like you try your best to pump the pedal as much as you can. Like, even though you break a line, you still have a little bit of braking power. Don't just put your foot all the way down there. Try to pump it. And then if you have an e-brake, like try to slow the car down, and then like think about looking way ahead to see what's ahead of you off track. Perhaps try your best to get it slowed down or in a position where it's not going to be like a crazy, you crash into a barrier or go head on or something like that, right?
Yeah. There's a couple of things that you mentioned there, right, that I think it's worth clarifying a little bit. So anti-knockback, right? So I think the most common type, let's explain like why that actually, like that separation starts to happen, right? So when you apply the brakes, the pistons are pushing against the back pad, the backing plate of the pad, and the pad surface touches the rotor, right? What tends to happen is then when you release the brake, the pads can move away from the surface of the rotor. Well, of course they're going to move away from the surface of the rotor. And if you're going through like a chicane or some S's or something like that, as you're steering with the steering geometry, especially if you have like floating rollers or something like that.
Yep.
It's going to create some clearance. It's going to push those pads away, right? And so what some calipers have is anti-knockback springs inside the pistons to apply some pressure to keep the pads close to the rotors. Now, why is that important? The important is, let's say you're going into a very deep braking zone, and depending on how the pads have moved, maybe it's not consistent through every lap, right? Sometimes maybe it's stayed very close. The ears on the pads are a little bit sticky or something like that, and they're not backing off. Sometimes maybe it's like really loose and they backed off a lot. And so what's going to happen when you initially apply the brakes? Well, if they're close, that's good. You're going to feel pressure immediately. But if the pads have been knocked back, as the issue is named, it's going to take that tiny little bit more time before the brakes are going to hit your threshold, right? And so tapping the brakes right at the end of the straight is just basically trying to get the braking feel as consistent as possible, right? And I guess there is a nice little, it's almost like a nice little safety check as well, as to like, do I feel something, right? Like if you're not feeling anything, it just keeps moving, then it tells you that, okay, I got to brake much earlier to see what the situation is, right? The other thing that you just mentioned around, what's diagnosing the problem? I think this is absolutely critical, right? As you said, if the pedal is firm, it's likely not an issue with your fluid and the pads are overheated. Something in your braking system is overheated. Like I guess it could be like tires are just running away from you as well, right? But basically, like there's the something in the friction system is not working as it should, and it's most likely that the pads are overheated. And if your pedal is not firm, it's likely vapor lock. The fluid's boiled over. The hydraulic pressure is not good, and you have to work through that by, as you said, pumping the brakes a bit more. So like, pedal goes to the floor, release it, try to get back on it again, see if it can build some pressure, right? But the interesting thing I think is, okay, in both those situations, in let's say in brake fade, right? How would you adjust your driving line as you're approaching, let's say, a deep braking zone, and you experience pedal still firm, but the pads are not giving you that coefficient of friction that you used to. Let's say like it feels like 30% less.
Mm-hmm. See, if it's 30% less, maybe the corner before it was 20% less. Maybe the corner before it was 10% less.
Yeah,
I think you have to really be very sensitive to your braking
sure. Makes sense.
performance
Mhm.
and be mindful of the number of laps that you've done. And on top of that, in terms of from the preparation side, have you done your fluids, and is the pad there? Can that pad take that amount of abuse?
Yep.
Stock pads could probably take a lap or two. Street track maybe 5 laps, and then like a performance race endurance pad can go for a long, super long time. Just keep going on and on and on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we got to think a few corners ahead, and also be very, very mindful of what is our setup. And then when you begin to feel a little bit of that fade at a time, to be cognizant of that. But let's say we haven't done any of that, and you have like significant brake fade, and you're flying at the speed that you would be if your brakes were 100%. Basically, you just have to try to keep the car as straight as possible, do as much braking, slow the car down as much as you can, basically square off the corner, right? Because if you try to like force a car in, and you've blown all your braking zones, you've already made a big mistake, right? Try to slow down the car as best you can in a straight line. And then try to keep some load on the front tires as you come off to just at least round off the corner, right? That's partly why I had a student ask me, why don't we just drive on the outside of every single corner, because you can carry more speed. Like the radius is just bigger, right? And so my answer to that was, number one is you got to consider the next corners and the next corners and next corner. You want to optimize not just one corner at a time, driving always on the outside, never touching apexes. Yes, bigger radius, carry more speed. Technically, if you take it at one corner at a time, but you got to consider the next one. But the other thing is, when you hit your apexes, when you don't early or late apex, you also have some margin to play around when situations like that happen, right? Like, let's say you take the normal racing line, you hit a geometric apex. Like if you actually don't hit your braking zone right on time, and the car travels forward, you still have some margin to actually allow the car to go straight, almost like taking a rain line, for example, giving yourself a deeper braking zone, slowing the car. If we're only talking about like 20 or 30% brake loss, you should be totally fine to brake really, really, really deep and then come off trail and then square off the corner, right? But if you experience 30% brake fade and you didn't learn from that the last corner, and you have 40% brake fade the next corner, and you have 50% brake fade, you can't. There's no way. You don't have that much margin to save the car. Like, you really have to listen to the car and understand your setup.
For sure. Like, if the previous corner you already experienced like 5 to 10% brake fade, and you're like, well, that was kind of weird. You shouldn't expect that the next corner is going to be any different.
Yeah.
Okay, like listen
or
to your
better.
gut.
It's going to be
or
worse.
better. I think some people have that mentality where, they just have like, oh, like maybe that was a fluke, right? So like, just you got to catch yourself that like it's very rarely that it's something that was just a momentary fluke, especially when it comes to braking. And when it comes to brake fade from pad,
excuse me,
bless you. Squaring off the corner makes a ton of sense, right? So basically, try to lay apex, and what we're basically doing is trying to maximize the straight, right? You lay apex, you have a longer straight, you have more time to get the car slowed down before you commit to the corner, which again, we know that when we start applying turning, your stopping grip is diminished because now you're trying to turn the car as well, right? However, I do think there's one other aspect that's really important to mention when it comes to if it's pad fade from heat, is that you probably want to start easing off the brake a little bit. Give it a chance to, as you're trying to straighten out the car and go a little bit deeper on that straight, to see if lowering the application of the force, right, and trying to bring that heat down a little bit is actually going to give you a little bit more braking force, right? Just a little bit, just pull back just a little bit. You can still get back on it if you don't think it's helping or something like that, but you may be able to find somewhere in that gradient of modulating the brake off the brake a little bit that you might actually find a little bit more friction.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the one thing that not everyone may have that in their mind as they're going through that experience. It's like, oh, like, can I actually stop faster by coming off the brake a little bit, right? Now, in the situation of where it is fluid based, right? I think you're still trying to square off the corner because you're trying to maximize the length of the straight to give you more time to stop the car. And you're coming off of it and you're trying to give it extra pumps, right? But in terms of the driving line, I think in those situations it's going to be the same, but the application of the brake pedal itself is what's going to be different, right?
That's right. Yeah. Pumping the brakes, trying to get some brakes back into it. And then I've seen a lot of people like rip the e-brake while they have steering input. And then they spin. The thing is, if you've already made that mistake, remember e-brake locks the rear, right? And if you slam the brakes super hard and you try to turn the car, the rear end's going to be light, right? You're hard on the brakes, like it's trying to stop. It's almost better to just keep the car relatively straight for as long as you can, get max performance, use the e-brake, like slow the car down, right? As best as you can, and then try to look ahead for where you release that e-brake, or at least like modulate the e-brake and your foot to try to get the car away from a barrier, away from tires, whatever, anything, to try to like get it to like a safer spot, right? Yeah. But yeah, if it's fluid, you just got to pump the brakes and again, straight line e-brake. But hopefully no one gets to that point because you're so in tune with the car and you're feeling for brake fade and then listening to your car. Basically, the car's always giving you feedback. You just have to listen to it. I know there's a lot of senses: steering, brakes, acceleration pedal, yaw, rotation, whatever, all these things. But just being aware of what's happening.
Yeah. The e-brake thing, it really should be the last resort. Yeah. And I do think you're right. Like, it's something that you should try to only apply on the straights if you can. Yeah. For an OEM car, the other thing that I will say, again, last resort, if you're going to apply the e-brake, because you need, like you said, you need to try and modulate that as well, keep your thumb on the release. Yeah. Like, don't just rip it and then have it locked and then you're panicking spinning, on how to like release the e-brake. Last resort. Last resort.
I mean, we've had a few friends that have had, the e-brake help them out in certain situations, right? Yeah, like both of our endurance racing teammates.
Oh yeah,
Chris Bisson. Chris. Chris had a situation where he had to use the e-brake, and of course,
I don't remember this.
Yeah, you got
it's in the back of my brain.
Yeah, you got to ask him about it. But because he wouldn't drive. For some car that didn't have an e-brake, so I'm not going to drive that car because it didn't have an e-brake. And I was like, why? He's like, I had a situation where I needed to use it. So maybe we're going to ask Chris about that. But also our other friend, at DDT, right?
Well, Jason didn't have to pull.
He didn't have to pull the e-brake, but you want to talk about what he did to slow the car down?
Yeah. So we have a friend. He ended up having a rupture in a stainless steel line, which, by the way, so if you run stainless steel lines, it needs to be part of your pre-track day checklist of visually inspecting, because when they bind, and I also say this because it's an aftermarket piece that people add on to like 86s, right? And so sometimes, depending on where you bring it to get it installed, it could be installation error in that it looks fine for 90% range of motion, but once you get to lock and the car's on the ground, right? A lot of people do it in the air, but sometimes you don't look at the clearance on the ground. You can have issues with binding or rubbing, right? And so like over time, like you might not notice it for 2 or 3 years, and then lo and behold, you have a rupture because it's just been rubbing or binding too hard. So final corner, he's going in. It's the deepest braking zone in the track at GDT, I would say.
For sure.
Final corner?
For sure. It's
pretty close with the front straight, but I think it is faster.
No, it is. Yeah, it is.
Well, with the 86, it's the same because you're at red line on both straights, so speed is the same. Clearly, you can see from the footage he didn't get full brakes, and his reaction was fast enough to avoid the corner, and it basically just started taking the track exit. But the thing is that DDT track exit comes up and there's like a wall.
Yeah.
Pretty quick. You got to do like a quick chicane.
Yeah.
And so what he did is like he still had some brake force, which is great. And then once he got the car somewhat slowed down, he downshifted and used the engine to help with the braking. And it honestly, you look at the footage and it's like just enough speed scrubbed off to make it through. Had there been another car there trying to get onto the track, because of the weird thing with DDT where the cars actually cross over, depending on who's organizing and how they've organized the lanes, that could have been a pretty tricky situation. But that was just like quick heads up thinking, right? Like two things. One, not trying to commit to the corner, right? Because that would have thrown the car into the air for sure.
It would have gone to the grass. It would have been sideways, hopped the curve, and would have slammed into the wall.
Yeah, for sure. So, and then the engine braking, that's something I guess that we didn't really discuss as another tactic, right? Obviously, you don't want to grenade your engine, but like if you've got some of the braking done and you know you're in the right rev range, you can throw it in, or you can also, if you're going a little bit too fast, obviously like your safety is more important than the motor. Okay. At the end of the day, like I think I'd rather blow an engine than destroy a frame or cause harm to my body. Right. You could also slip the clutch after you throw it into gear as well to not have it sudden, because that could lock up the rears too. Right. And have the same issue with pulling the e-brake. You could also gradually release the clutch to try and help with the engine braking to slow down the car as well. Yeah. So a lot of tactics, not a lot of time to react to it. But I think the general rule of thumb is just don't panic. Try to straighten out the car. Don't commit to the corner, right? Try to round it out, square it off, right? Late apex. And the main thing that you need to be aware of is like, why do you think the brakes are fading, right? Either the pad heat or the air in the lines. But as you said, the most important thing is how do you prevent that situation from happening in the first place? Pre-track inspections. And then, as you said, if you get any inkling during the lap previous to the corner where failure happens that something is off, you should trust your gut.
Don't mess around with your brakes.
Don't mess around the brakes.
Don't mess around with your brakes.
Cars are much faster at slowing down than they are at speeding up. And you'd rather it slow down from the application of brakes than hitting a wall.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Let's get to our last segment. So Q&A. Wow, we're just on a roll on braking today.
I know.
So the question is, by the way, this kind of came about through a discussion on our Discord, 2Track Mind Discord. So we do have a server if you guys want to come and hang out with us, and if you have any questions or just discussions or what, asking us what events we're going to be at, link in the description on, well, whether on YouTube or on Spotify. We got the link to the Discord channel. So the question is, if you had to choose when you're selecting pads or tires, right? Mostly, let's say like the pads, sorry, the tires are a given, right? Because everyone's just basically, if you're doing time attack lapping days, you're probably on like, I don't know, CRS, AO52, or RS4, something like that, right? The competitive choices are fairly limited, and you're trying to pick a pad for it. Would you prefer to have more pad, i.e. the pads are able to lock up the tires, or would you prefer to have more tires such that you're never hitting ABS? How would you think about that?
The thing is, I think even with a street pad with 200 tread wear, I think you can hit ABS.
You think so?
I think so. If I slam on that pedal, potentially, I think so. I just don't think you could do it repeatedly.
No, yeah, exactly.
But you could definitely do it
after like 3 corners.
They could definitely do it once.
So
maybe
let
twice.
me clarify. Through the course of the entire session, let's say. Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with a different answer. I think you want to try to match your pad to the driver and to the tire.
Of course.
Yeah. But if you tell me I have to pick one, either I have too much tire or too much pad.
Yeah.
I would go with too much pad because then I can try to modulate that myself as a driver.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm not super, super hard on the brakes anyways. And I don't hit ABS often. Sometimes I do, maybe like over like a curb or something like that. Or I don't know, a really bumpy braking zone like at Shenanville, maybe.
Yeah.
But at least I can modulate that
Yeah.
a little bit more than if I'm overtired.
Yeah. And I guess I should clarify, like, I'm not suggesting like you put yourself in a situation where the pad is overheated. Therefore, that's why you have too much tire. But more so on like there are some pads that have a high heat range but lower coefficient of friction, like a very mild endurance pad or something like that, right? That's kind of what I'm more talking about. And truthfully, like you said, you're probably going to be able to lock it up, but it requires like significant application of brakes, right? So lower coefficient of friction, obviously, like there's benefits in something like, let's say, like endurance racing, where it's like easier on the rotors. There's probably a little bit easier to modulate. But I do think I would agree with you in that, like, if you had to choose, I would still prefer, within reason, slightly more pad, because you never really know if you're leaving performance on the table at the end of a straight. Like if you aren't able to get to ABS with like heavy brake application, I feel like in your mind, you know that you could probably, with a different set of pads, go a little bit deeper, right? And just grab a tenth or two on some really deep braking zones at the end of straights. So, yeah, that's how I would think about it.
But in practically speaking, I like to run endurance pads, like exactly what we're talking about. But the high end endurance pads, they have really, really good modulation, and they can handle a lot of heat. But also they have like really good like biting force. They have
they
really
got
good
everything.
They got everything, like endless MA45B, MA45C, like just that's the pad we use. Like that is just like
because we use street tires. I mean, those pads are pads that are used with endurance cars that are running slicks.
Yeah.
Right. So like we don't drive on slicks very often. Who knows what that experience is actually like, right? And when you're on slicks, maybe you're like, oh, I need the MS pads or whatever, right?
Like the one thing I would never want is just lack of confidence in brakes.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I just need confidence in the brakes.
You don't want to think about it.
You don't even want to think about the brakes, right? They got to work. And then, if it's a tire, it's like, oh, I'm not pulling as many G's in the corners or whatever like that. Or, oh, I can't quite put the power down as well, whatever. But brakes is like, for me, I need them to be like perfect. Yeah.
Nope. All right. Well, that's all the topics I have for today.
Okay.
Anything else on your mind?
No, man.
What's your next event?
Next event, there is CA Motorsports, which is
What's this?
Monday. It's a GP.
Okay.
CA Motorsports, run by Desmond C, hence CA Motorsports.
Oh, okay.
It's like I'm instructing that day, and I'm going to be doing some lapping as well. So it's like the Victoria Monday long weekend.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then after that, we got OTA school and OTA event 2 at GP.
What day is that again?
End of the month. I think it's like, I don't know,
nice.
whatever the Saturday,
Going
Sunday
fast.
is. Whatever
Going
the
fast.
last Saturday, Sunday of May is. But I will hopefully bring a bunch of cars out. Hopefully you can come out. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you can drive the BRZ or Freak or something out. But
we'll see.
It'll be fun.
We'll see what we can do. Yeah, I would like to do GP.
Yeah.
If there's spaces left for that event, if anyone's listening and you want to try GP, like that's probably one of the best events to go to.
Yeah,
like,
OTA school.
You get a coach for the entire day.
Yeah.
Someone in your ear. And like really safe, really enjoyable. Get yourself acquainted with a very cool track.
Anyway. Absolutely. Highest average speed of any track in North America. Former F1 track. Big elevation change. It's quite
a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, seeing as next Monday is a holiday, we're probably, and you're going to be at the track day anyway, so we'll probably record like, I don't know, like on Tuesday or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, see you guys then. All right. Enjoy. Have a good week.
Guys.
Take care.